November 14th, 1965. The Drang Valley, Vietnam. Landing Zone X-ray. The helicopters touched down and immediately the shooting started. Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore's men of the 1st Battalion 7th Cavalry stepped off into tall elephant grass and into the largest North Vietnamese army force any American unit had ever encountered in Vietnam. 2,000 NVA soldiers hidden in the Chu Pong Massif, a mountain that had sheltered enemy troops for a generation. Moore had 395 men. The math was not in their favor. By nightfall, the landing zone was surrounded. The perimeter was so tight that some American dead were within arm's reach of the men still fighting. Mortar rounds, AK fire, human wave assaults. The NVA came in so close that American artillery had to be called in almost on top of their own positions. Moore's radio operator crouched beside him in the dark, relaying coordinates. Around them, men screamed for medics. The medics were already treating 3 men at once. This is the story of what Moore said when headquarters told him to get out and leave the wounded behind. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the Vietnam War stories that don't have easy answers, about leadership, loyalty, and the price of keeping your word. To understand what Moore said that night, you need to understand what he promised 3 weeks before. Before his battalion deployed, Moore gathered his men at Fort Benning, Georgia. He stood in front of them, not as a general, not as a symbol, as the man who would be on the ground with them, in the same mud, under the same fire. He made 3 promises. We are going into combat. Some of you may not come back, but I make you this. I will be the first to set foot on the field. I will be the last to step off. And I will leave no man behind. Not dead, not wounded, not missing. No man. That promise was now being tested. By the second night at LZ X-ray, Moore had 79 men dead or wounded. Helicopter pilots were risking everything to fly in ammunition and fly out the injured. But the LZ was hot, rounds cracking through the air every time a chopper came in. At battalion headquarters, the conversation was happening. The same conversation that happens when tactical situations become unsustainable. Extract Moore's unit. They've held the position. Declare it a victory. Get them out. The problem? Not everyone who was wounded had been evacuated. Several men were too critical to move without dedicated medical helicopters. Those helicopters were unavailable. The nearest field hospital was overwhelmed. The field order came down the radio. Begin extraction. Priority is the ambulatory wounded and the battalion command. A young captain relayed the message to Moore. Moore didn't look up from the map. Read it back to me. The captain read it. Moore was quiet for a moment. Around them, the sounds of the jungle at war. Insects, distant shooting, the static of radios, the low voices of men who understood they were in a very bad place. How many non-ambulatory wounded? 14, sir. Maybe 16. And the helicopters to move them? Not available, sir. Command says... I know what command says. Moore folded the map. Get me the radio. He keyed it himself. What followed was not a long conversation. Moore did not argue. He did not plead. He stated, I will not move until every one of my wounded is on a helicopter. I don't care what the order says. No man on this field gets left behind. That is not a request. That is not a suggestion. That is what is going to happen. The voice on the other end cited regulations, tactical necessity, command authority. Moore's response was direct. You can relieve me of command when I get back. You can court-martial me when I get back. But right now, I am the commander on this ground, and I will not leave a single man of mine for the enemy to find. Send me the helicopters, or send someone else to give this order in person, because I will not give it. The radio went quiet. The helicopters came. It took another 4 hours. Every wounded man at LZ X-ray was extracted before Moore took a single step toward his own transport. He was, as promised, the last American to board. When the final helicopter lifted off, Moore turned and looked down at the clearing below, at the broken grass, the shell casings, the blood-dark earth, and then looked forward. He never looked back. What happened to those men who were left at LZ X-ray matters. Of the 79 casualties in Moore's battalion, all were evacuated. None were captured. None were left. The battle became the subject of Moore's book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young, and later a major film. It is studied in military schools around the world, not primarily as a tactical exercise, but as a case study in what it means to keep your word when keeping it is the most difficult thing you've ever done. Moore never faced court-martial. The officer at headquarters who issued the extraction order never publicly addressed the exchange. Moore served for another decade and retired as a major general. He returned to the Drang Valley in 1993, to the same clearing, LZ X-ray, alongside the North Vietnamese general who had commanded the enemy forces there. The two men shook hands. Moore said later that he did not regret any decision he made on that ground, but he carried the names of the men who died there until the day he died in 2017. He had them memorized, all 79. Here is the question this raises. Moore disobeyed a direct order. Technically, he was insubordinate. The command structure exists for reasons. Chaos follows when individuals decide for themselves which orders to obey. But he also kept a promise he made to men who were going to die for him. At what point does following orders become a betrayal? At what point does breaking orders become the only moral choice? If you were the commander on that ground, with wounded men and a helicopter order that said go, what would you do? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more Vietnam War stories that don't have easy answers, make sure you subscribe.